The girl who made a 6-time Grand Slam champion cry twice. She dropped to her knees on the most sacred lawn in tennis, and for a few seconds, she couldn't breathe. Not because she'd lost, because a 21-year-old from a country with 0 Grand Slam tennis history had just done something that wasn't supposed to be possible twice in 16 months. She had beaten Iga Swiatek, a 6-time Grand Slam champion, on center court at Wimbledon, in front of the entire tennis world. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. Before the tears, before the flags, before the history books, there was a 13-year-old girl who got on a plane, left everything she knew, and disappeared into a foreign country with no guarantee she'd ever be good enough. What happened to her in the years nobody was watching is the reason that moment on center court hit as hard as it did. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why a grown woman, drenched in the biggest win of her career, could barely get a sentence out without falling apart. Before we get into it, if you love stories about athletes who had no business making it, but did anyway, hit subscribe now because this channel is full of them, and you don't want to miss the next one. Let's go back to the beginning because this story does not start at Wimbledon. It starts on an ordinary tennis court in Quezon City, in the Philippines, with a little girl in ruffled socks and light-up shoes, trying to beat her older brother. Alex Eala was born into a sporting family. Her mother, Riza, had competed as a swimmer at the Southeast Asian Games. Tennis, though, was never the obvious choice. In a country obsessed with basketball and volleyball, tennis barely registers. There was no packed pipeline of Filipino tennis stars for a young girl to look up to. No blueprint. No proof that this could even work. Alex started playing because her grandfather introduced her to the game, and because her brother was already on the court. And like most little sisters, she wanted to keep up with him. There was nothing glamorous about those afternoons. No cameras. No crowd. Just repetition. Ball after ball, day after day, and one lesson from her grandfather that would follow her for the rest of her life. If you want it, you work for it. That lesson was about to be tested in a way most 13-year-olds never have to face. By the time Alex hit her early teens, it was clear the local courts couldn't take her any further. If she was going to become a real professional, she needed better coaching, better competition, a completely different environment. So her family made a decision that most families would find almost unthinkable. They sent her to Mallorca, Spain, to the Rafa Nadal Academy, at just 13 years old. 13. Old enough to understand exactly what she was leaving behind. Not old enough to be ready for how hard it would actually be. She left her parents. She left her brother. She left the Philippines. And she walked into one of the most demanding training environments in tennis, built entirely around discipline, pressure, and expectations most adults would struggle to handle. The academy gave her elite courts and elite coaches. What it couldn't give her was her family. The early years were brutal. Homesickness doesn't care how nice the facilities are. And professional tennis has a special kind of cruelty. You can do everything right, sacrifice everything you have, and still be nowhere near the top. That's exactly where Alex found herself for years. Junior success came first. She won the girls' doubles title at the Australian Open in 2020 and the French Open in 2021. Then capped it off with the US Open girls' singles title in 2022. She was, on paper, one of the best young players in the world. But junior tennis and professional tennis are two completely different sports. Nobody hands out ranking points for potential. By early 2025, Alex was ranked around 140th in the world. That number is important because it tells you exactly how far she still had to go. A ranking like that doesn't mean you're close to stardom. It means you're good enough to know the dream is real, and not nearly high enough to relax for a single second. Every one of those years away from home, every lonely night in Mallorca, was riding on a question nobody could answer yet. Was any of this actually going to work? Then came Miami. March 2025. Alex entered the Miami Open as a wild card, not a favorite, not even really on the radar. Then she started winning. First, she took down Jelena Ostapenko, the 2017 French Open champion. Then she beat Madison Keys, that year's reigning Australian Open champion. 2 Grand Slam winners gone. And then, in the quarterfinals, she walked onto the court against Iga Swiatek, at that point a 5-time Grand Slam champion and the world number 2. Nobody gave the 19-year-old 140th ranked wildcard a real shot. She won 6-2, 7-5. Not with luck. Not because Swiatek collapsed. Alex outplayed her. Flat, aggressive, relentless tennis that Swiatek herself admitted afterward she simply hadn't expected. Swiatek committed 32 unforced errors that day, more than double Alex's total, and told reporters her young opponent had played with real intention, real aggression, and had kept her focus throughout. That win made Alex the first Filipino player to beat a top 10 opponent since the WTA rankings began in 1975. 20 minutes after match point, she still looked like she couldn't quite believe it herself. Here's the part that gets left out of a lot of retellings. Alex didn't stop there. She kept going. In the semifinal, she pushed world number 4 Jessica Pegula to the absolute limit in a 2-hour, 26-minute battle that went past midnight, eventually falling 7-6, 5-7, 6-3. She left Miami as the lowest-ranked semifinalist in the tournament's history, having beaten 3 Grand Slam champions along the way. 18-time major champion Chris Evert publicly marveled at how Alex had anything left in the tank after that run. Miami didn't answer every question Alex had been carrying since she was 13, but it gave her something she'd never had before: proof. Proof the sacrifice had been worth it. Proof she belonged in the same conversation as the players she used to watch from a world away. And once an athlete has that kind of proof, something shifts. The question stops being, can I compete with them? It becomes, how many of them can I beat? Over the following months, Alex kept building. She climbed the rankings. She won WTA 125 level titles. She sharpened her grass court game, even training and playing doubles alongside Wimbledon royalty like Venus Williams. By the time Wimbledon 2026 arrived, something that would have sounded absurd a year earlier had become official. Alex Eala was seeded 29th, the first Filipino player ever seeded at a Grand Slam. Think about what that actually means. A country of more than 100 million people, with no tennis tradition to speak of, suddenly had a face. A real one. A young woman who trained after school with her grandfather, who left home at 13, who survived years of obscurity, now walking into the most historic, most tradition-bound tournament in the sport. Round 1. Alex faced Renata Zarazua of Mexico. She was sharp from the very first point, breaking early and closing it out 6-1, 6-2 in just over an hour. It was her first ever main draw win at Wimbledon, and the first main draw singles win by any Filipino player in the tournament's history. For most players, that milestone alone would be the story of the week. Alex barely paused to enjoy it. Round 2 brought a familiar and painful name: Maya Joint of Australia, the same player who had denied Alex a maiden WTA title the year before at Eastbourne, coming back from a set down and saving 4 championship points to do it. This time, the match started just as ominously. Alex dropped the first set 3-6. It looked, for a moment, like it might be Eastbourne all over again. Then something clicked. Alex responded by winning the second set 6-2, and then delivered a complete bagel in the third 6-0 to close it out. Revenge, delivered in the most emphatic way possible. She was through to the third round, the first Filipino singles player in the Open era to ever get that far at a major. And waiting for her there was Iga Swiatek. Now, this was not Miami. Miami had been a hard court, a breakout, a surprise nobody saw coming. This was center court at Wimbledon, the most famous tennis court on earth, against the defending champion, the woman who had obliterated her way to the title the year before with a 6-0, 6-0 demolition in the final. Swiatek knew exactly who Alex was this time. There would be no surprise factor. Just 2 players who already knew what the other was capable of. The first set was brutal, tense, physical. It dragged on and on, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, 70 minutes. Neither player able to fully pull away. Swiatek pushed. Alex answered. And it all came down to a tiebreak that turned into the emotional center of the entire match. Alex raced out to a lead. Swiatek clawed back. Swiatek then had not one, but 2 set points to close it out and seize control of the match. Alex saved both. At 9-all in the tiebreak, she found one more gear, then another, and finally, after an 84-minute opening set, She claimed it 7-6, 11 points to 9. Somewhere in that set, a visibly frustrated Swiatek was seen hurling her racket into her bag. Once Alex survived that set, the entire complexion of the match changed. She stormed out to a 4-0 lead in the second set. Swiatek, being Swiatek, clawed back to 4-2, refusing to fold quietly. But Alex held her nerve, closing it out 6-2 to complete a stunning 7-6, 6-2 victory, ending the defending champion's title defense in the third round, in front of a center court crowd that had turned entirely into a sea of noise and Filipino flags. And then she fell to her knees. Not a rehearsed celebration, not a polished TV moment. She simply collapsed under the weight of what had just happened. Because this wasn't only about beating a 6-time major champion for the second time in 16 months. This was every lonely year in Spain arriving at once. The 13-year-old who left home. The grandfather who taught her that if you want it, you work for it. The ranking outside the top 100 that once made the whole dream feel uncertain. In her on-court interview, barely able to hold it together, Alex tried to explain what the moment meant. She said that for a player like Iga who has won so many Grand Slams, or someone like Serena or Venus Williams, a win like this might look small in the grand scheme of a career. But for a girl who grew up in the Philippines, she couldn't even finish the sentence before the tears took over completely. This win made her the first Filipina in history to reach the second week of a Grand Slam tournament. And it was, remarkably, her 7th career win over a top 10 opponent. But here's what made Alex Eala different from a typical feel-good underdog story. She didn't sound like someone ready to coast on one emotional afternoon. Even mid-interview, still crying, she made it clear she had another match to play. Jasmine Paolini, the number 13 seed and a former Wimbledon finalist, was waiting in the 4th round. And that match, 4 days later, is where the fairy tale finally met its limit. Paolini came out firing, racing to a 4-1 lead in the first set. Alex clawed back to 5-4, but Paolini held to take the set 6-4. Alex regrouped in the second, ripping off 3 straight games from 3-2 down to seize control, and served it out 6-4 to force a decider. The third set stayed locked at 3-3 before Paolini's experience finally showed, closing out the match 6-3 to end Alex's Wimbledon run after 2 hours and 22 minutes on center court. It was a loss, but it was the kind of loss that only comes from getting further than anyone from your country ever has before. Alex Eala left Wimbledon 2026 as the first Filipina to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam, having beaten a defending Wimbledon champion along the way, in a run that took her from a 13-year-old crying herself to sleep in a foreign country to the second week of the most famous tournament on earth. And maybe that's why this whole story hits differently than the usual shock upset headline. Upsets happen in sports all the time. A favorite has a bad day, an underdog catches fire, the clip goes viral, and the tour just moves on. This wasn't that. This was a full-circle moment, 16 months in the making, from a wild card in Miami to center court at Wimbledon. Because when this win landed back home, it wasn't just national pride. It was permission. Permission for a young girl in Manila, in Cebu, in Davao, anywhere in the Philippines to pick up a racket and believe this sport could belong to her too. Permission for parents to believe that tennis isn't reserved only for countries with decades of infrastructure and tradition behind it. Alex Eala isn't the next Iga Swiatek. She isn't the next anyone. She's the first Alexandra Eala, the first seeded Filipino player at a Grand Slam, the first to win a main draw match at Wimbledon, the first to reach the second week of a major. And firsts carry a particular kind of weight. They come loaded with expectation, with pressure, with a whole country watching every single point. But tennis doesn't care how emotional the last win was. The next opponent doesn't care about the childhood story. The tour just keeps moving, and the ball keeps coming back. That's exactly why this isn't the end of the story. It's the second chapter. The first chapter was the moment nobody expected. The second is what she does now that everyone is watching. Underneath the seating, the history-making run, the tears on center court, she's still that same kid, the one in ruffled socks and light-up shoes, trying to beat her brother after school, listening to her grandfather tell her the same thing over and over. If you want it, you work for it. That sentence followed her all the way from a small court in Quezon City to center court, Wimbledon. And on the 4th of July 2026, When she dropped to her knees in front of the entire tennis world, it finally looked like the world understood what her family had known all along. This was never impossible. It was just waiting for someone stubborn enough to prove it.